Hello again. We now come to the tutorial for section 3 of the Touch of Frost blanket. This is the part that I call the holly border, and it's very simple to do, but it does make a nice striking edging which goes round the first two sections of the pattern. And that's what we're going to do today. I've isolated it. This is the full blanket I've got here, and I've isolated the section that we're going to be making today with these two bits of paper. And it starts with 1, 2, 3 very easy, simple rounds of granny stitch before we get on to the holly. And that's what I'm going to start with showing you today, and hopefully we'll manage to get the whole thing completed. So I'm going to remove this, and as you can see, this is how it fits into the blanket. We've got the section 2, which was the stripes in white, and of course the 3 squares that go round the corner. And this is just something to border all of that and link it all together before we get on to section 4, which we'll talk about later. So I'm going to put the blanket to one side for the moment. And since the blanket itself is completely finished, I can't actually work on it. So if you remember, we made this little sample, which was to show you how to join the squares of section 1. So I'm going to pretend, for the sake of this tutorial, that this is the complete blanket, and I'm going to add my holly border around this. Now of course this is different from the blanket itself, so you just need to use your imagination, because obviously after this section there was the section of the white stripes and then the holly, but the white stripes have been sorted out in a separate video. I've done a video of how to make them, so this is what I'm going to use to show you how to do the holly border. It's just an edge, any old edge, so it won't matter that it's not exactly the same as the blanket. And we're going to start with the silver. Now, quick explanation. The batik silver, which is what you use for outlining all of section 1, is a yarn that I've actually run out of. This is, I actually did this sample in Hint of Silver. And in the blanket itself, as I said, you have 3 rounds of granny stitch to put in before we do the actual holly. And on the blanket, the round 1 was done in batik silver, round 2 in the James C. Brett Twinkle in the gold, and then round 3 was done in Hint of Silver. Now, since I don't have any of the batik silver left, I'm just going to use this for the first and third rounds. But you follow the pattern, and if you've got plenty of your batik silver, which you should do, use that. Now, take your blanket to start with and turn it to the reverse. So your stitch marker is underneath, and your last round of the blanket will be on the reverse side. And this is very simple, so it's not something that's going to be a problem for you. You start by attaching your yarn in the corner, and in the blanket that's the corner of the squares, the 3 squares that fit round the corners of section 2. So it'll be similar to this where you're starting. So you attach your yarn, bring this right into camera in the usual way, and chain 2 for your first treble. You're going to be working in trebles here. So chain 2 and 2 trebles into the corner. This should be becoming quite straightforward for you, I think, by now. And then we just need to treble 3 in every space along. So I'll just go along here as quickly as I can, because what I'm going to do is show you again what happens when you come to a bit where the 2 squares meet, because you have a join with 2 corners, obviously, the corner of one square and the corner of another, and there's a little different thing that you need to do at that point. So this is my last space for the 3 trebles before I come to the corner of the square. And now we're at the corner, and you'll see, like I said, you've got 2 corners touching each other, and what we want to do is, instead of doing a cluster of 3 grannies in there, 3 grannies trebles and then another cluster in here, which would give you too many clusters, we want to do one that's going to kind of sit over between the 2. And what we do there is we do first treble in this corner like that, and then I'm going to do a treble 2 together. So I've yarned over, put my hook into the corner, pulled up a loop, yarned over, pull through 2, and there's still 2 loops left on the hook, and I'm not going to do anything to them. Instead, I'm going to yarn over, put my hook into the next corner, just make sure I get the right space, and pull up the loop. So there are 4 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through the first 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 3. And if I hold that up, you can see there's a kind of an inverted V shape. That's treble 2 together. You've used that similar stitch when you were making the green leaves for the holly square, so you should know that, but this is just jumping from one corner to the other, and then we finish off this group of trebles by doing 1 more in the second corner. So what you've got is you've got 1 stitch, 2 half stitches and 1 stitch, and if you look at the top you can see that there is just 1, 2, 3 stitches showing on the top, and that has put a group of trebles right over the top of that join, and that's going to keep your stitch count accurate for the rest of the border. If you had put 2 groups of trebles in there, you would have had too many, and by the time you start working the other rounds of granny stripe, you would have got your edge starting to ripple because there would be too many stitches, and that's not nice. The only way to sort that is to pull it back and redo it, and who likes doing that? So I'm going to work on, and I'm going to work all the way around this little square, this little sample, remembering that I've got another join like that to deal with. And if we go back to the blanket itself, you only have that happening once, twice, and then you've got this nice long stretch of the white stripe where it's just a simple granny stitch, and then when you come to the other end you've got a corner and another corner. So you've got 4 to think about on each side. But apart from that, it's just a case of working around your blanket. When you come to the outer edge, the corner on the outer edge, it's like you would normally do treble 3, chain 2, treble 3 and round the corner and off you go again. So what I'll do is I'll see you back here when I'm about to start the gold, and I'll show you that, and then I'll finish the gold and I'll put in the round of hint of silver, and then we'll be ready to start the holly. So here we are. I have worked all the way round with the clusters of 3 trebles, granny stripe, and I'm back to the corner where I started, so I just finished it off by treble 3, chain 2 and slip stitching and fastening off. And I'm going to start the round with the twinkle yarn in the gold, and this time again I'm going to turn over. So this is actually the front side of the blanket uppermost. We've got the stitch marker, and I'm going to start in a corner. I tend to favour starting in a corner that's different from the one where I've finished. So I'm going to attach my yarn, and I'm just going to work a simple round of granny treble stitches all the way round. There's nothing complicated to do with this in this round. This is a simple round. You've already sorted out the bits where you had to go over the joins between the squares, so you just need to remember that you don't pierce between these. This is just one group of stitches, so you'll do your 3 trebles in this space and then 3 trebles in this space. So what I'll do is I'll work this round all the way round, and I'll do the next round, which is hint of silver, and then I'll see you when I'm back at the start of that round, when I've completed it all the way round, and I'll start you off on the holly bit. Here I am back with all 3 rounds completed of this section 3. 1, 2, 3, and I finished off again at a corner. I'm just going to show you on the blanket, and here we are. So that was 1, 2, 3 rounds done of the granny clusters, and then we're going to start a new round with the white yarn. So you can see I started in there, and I'm also going to bring in on that same round the dark green yarn to make 2 clusters, a single cluster, 2 clusters, a single cluster. So what we're going to actually be doing is carrying the 2 colours around with us. So we're actually going to be working with 2 colours in one round. The round after that will be a similar idea, where it will be 2 white and 1 red, and then there will be a final round of the well, actual fact, it'll be I think it should be, looking at it, it should be the batik silver, but of course I don't have that, so it will be the hint of silver that I use for that. So I'm going to put this to one side just now. You'll see that we start with the white in the corner, and I've turned my sample again, so we're on the front of the blanket and the last round is on the reverse. So I finished it off on this side, and I've turned it over, which brings us back to the front of the blanket again. Okay, now there's a neat way of working 2 colours together so that they don't tangle, because there's a real tendency, if you don't do it this way that I'm going to show you, that you'll end up with the whole thing all wrapping around each other, and you'll have to keep on stopping and untangling. So what I'm going to do is, let me see, make sure I get this into the right place. So I'm going to start as usual in the corner with my white. So it's chain 2. Get my starter. Yeah, there we go. Chain 2 and 2 trebles in the corner. Like that. Except what I'm going to do here is actually, I'm just going to check my blanket to make sure I don't have, it's one, whether it's 1 cluster or 2 for the first round. It's just the 1. Right, so, and I've got the red here, so I'm way ahead of myself. It's actually the green I'm going to be using. Now, that's the way you would normally start. So what I'm going to do here is pull it back 1. So we've done 1 chain 2 and 1 treble, because the third stitch in this first corner doesn't get finished off with the white. All we're going to do is get it to that point where there's still 2 loops on the hook, and instead of finishing that off with the white, I'm going to bend my new colour round and pull that through, and that's it started for the dark green. Right, now what I'm going to tell myself is I've got my white at the back and the green at the front, and if I keep that in mind all the way along, my yarn won't tangle. This very first bit is needs a little bit of helping hand with the, you feel as if you need 3 hands to do this, because you want to keep this loop on the hook relatively tight, but you also want to keep everything else nice and tight. So I'm going to pull that, and my white yarn is not going to be used for the moment because I've now got the green on my hook. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to lay that white yarn down on top of my work and make my treble stitch. Yes, it is a treble stitch. Make my treble stitch for my first cluster. At this point you can just pull everything up nice and firmly and make my second one and my third, because we're actually going to do 2 clusters of the dark green. So my white is still along the top, and I'm going to make my next cluster, but just do 2 trebles before you just do half of the next treble. So that's to there. This is at the front. Pick up the white and finish it off. Lay your dark green along the top of your work and work 1, 2 and half of 3. Pick up your green, it's at the front, go over the 2 loops to finish off, and then we can continue keeping your white yarn across the top of your work. And this of course has got 2 clusters, so you can do 1 complete one and then 1 with the 2 trebles and then the half treble. Well, when I say half treble, at 1 treble, but only made to this point. The white's at the back, so pick that up and lay your green across the top, and then 1, 2, and then start your third one, but finish it off with the green. So you get the idea. As long as you keep your balls of yarn, if you decide which one's going to lie at the front of your work and which one's going to lie at the back, then your yarn won't get tangled. Now you can see what, so you'll work all the way along to the end of your side of the blanket, and when you get to the side, I'm not going to do that at this point because I haven't checked to see if this is all going to fit neatly. It will on the blanket, but on this sample I haven't counted. So but what happens is you'll get along to the end, you'll finish off with your second of your groups of 2 dark green, and you've got white to put in the corner. So it's treble 3, chain 2, treble 2, third treble is where you change to the green again, and work all the way around with that to the end. So I'll see you, I'll do a little bit more. I'm not sure if this will fit into this part of the blanket. It doesn't really matter. I'll work round and I will show you what happens with the beginning of the next round. I've just worked round one side so far, but I thought I would just pop on again and say that, well, first of all, with a piece of extreme luck, it has worked out for me with this, so I will be able to go right the way around this sample square because my 2 green have come just before the corner. And I just want to say that when you're going round the corner, I've changed to the white, just make sure that your dark green goes with you. So it's going to work around the corner too, so that it's ready to start when you move round to the next side. So I'll do my 3 trebles and 3 more, but the third one is where we change to the green. So I get to this point, the green's at the front, and I just bring it in, and that's me ready to work round the other side as well. So again, I shall stop and come back when I've gone all the way round. So here we are, I've worked all the way round with my dark green and white, and like I said, by pure chance on this sample, it has worked out, which is quite lucky. And I have started the next round. Now, the thing to notice about this next round of the holly is that we don't turn it. We're working it on the front of the blanket, as well as the green round was worked on the front of the blanket. So you don't turn it for this round, you just start in a corner with your white yarn, chain 2 and treble 2, and we're going to do 2 white at this point. So 2 white clusters. So you're coming along to the next space along and make your 3 trebles, but of course after the halfway through the third, stop, because it's time to introduce the red yarn. And again, I'm going to say to myself that the white yarn is going to be at the back and the red at the front, so that they don't tangle. So we'll loop over, sorry, have I gone off camera there? Loop over and try to try to hold everything nice and firmly. This is the only sort of tricky bit, but you can pretend that you've got 3 hands instead of 2, and we're ready to start the next treble cluster. And of course the white yarn is lying across the top of your work. Now we're going to do just the 1 red, so then it's time to go to the back and pick up your white, and we're going to do 2 white. There's a debate really about whether you should see, when you come along to the next cluster, you can see that there's a little bit of the green showing from where it was carried through in the last round. I tend to pick that up. I think it hides it a little bit, so I'm just picking that up and working underneath it with my first cluster of white, and then I'm going to come along and start the next cluster as normal. 2 trebles, the third one, stop, pick up your red and finish it off, and you can see that the red is actually sitting in the middle between the two green, and that kind of makes it look a bit like a holly. So white at the back, and I'll show you what that looks like. So there we have the beginning of the holly pattern. So this is 2 white, 1 red, 2 white, 1 red, all the way round until you get back to the beginning. And at that point you're finished with the 2 colours, and you can pick up your light silver again. And I do believe, I'm just going to make sure that I do believe that for the I'm just going to have a look at this to be certain. But I think I've turned my blanket for the very last round. So this round of silver is on the reverse, just to balance it up, because you've got it on the reverse there. So these 2 rounds of the holly leaves are worked on the front, and then we're back to the reverse side for the last round, which is just a plain simple round of grey. So I'll go all the way round with my holly, and then I'll work my grey round, and I'll let you see what it looks like at the end. At this point I've gone all the way round with my red and white round, and there are bits, I've actually turned this to the reverse side, but if you put it to the front you can actually see little bits of the red in places, not all, just some places where it's shining through the carried over red. That should get fixed when we're doing this next round. Now I've turned it over to the reverse side, and I've started with my chain 2 and 2 trebles, and this is a simple round, just the one colour. So all you need to pay attention to is the spaces that you're going to be working your 3 trebles into, because if there's a little bit of the red showing, like there, can you see the red against? Put your hook underneath the red yarn to lift it up so that the space doesn't contain the red anymore, it's tucked into the grey yarn. And continue all the way round like that. This is a little bit where you change colour. It's not quite so easy to see where the space is, but it's underneath that colour change, and you can make your 3 trebles. And along here, another colour change, just pop in your hook underneath. And along, this is the next double white one, so there's a bit of red being carried, and just put your hook underneath that red to lift it up, and so on. There will always inevitably be a little bit of the carried thread showing. That's just something that you have to accept, but it is looking a lot better on the front now that the silver is covering most of the dark red yarn, and it's looking very nice and neat and flat. So that is, I'll continue all the way round and finish that off, and that is the end of section 3 of the Touch of Frost blanket, the holly round.